You're nothing but a failure, Daniel. I won't waste my life with a man who lost his baggage handler job. I deserve a man with wings, not one who carries bags. The captain makes me feel alive. You're just dead weight. A nobody. I want a man who soars above the clouds, not one crawling on the ground with suitcases. Those were the words Clara spat as she walked out on her husband, her arm clinging tightly to the senior pilot she thought was her golden ticket. But she had no idea that the man she discarded wasn't a simple worker at all, he was the hidden owner of the very airline she was running toward. What happened next will make you question everything you think you know about loyalty, greed, and revenge. Viewers, have you ever been underestimated by someone you gave your all to? How would you respond when the day finally comes to turn the tables? The afternoon sun glared off the polished glass walls of Houston International Airport. Travelers rushed through the terminals, wheels of their luggage clattering against the tiles. Daniel Whitmore, dressed in his Navy baggage handler uniform, stood on the tarmac staring at the supervisor who had just spoken the words that shattered his life. Daniel, I'm sorry. Cuts have to be made. Hand in your badge. The plastic ID card trembled in his palm. For 8 years he had carried bags heavier than his own dreams, sweating under Texas heat, never complaining. He had a family to feed, a wife he adored. At least he thought she adored him too. But as the words sank in, a cold dread wrapped around his chest, not because he lost the job, but because of what Clara, his wife, would say. Inside the staff break room, Clara's voice already rang out like a whip. She had insisted on meeting him the moment she heard the rumor. Dressed sharply in a red blazer, makeup flawless, she looked more like a corporate executive than a baggage handler's wife. You lost the job, she spat, folding her arms. Her eyes narrowed, not in worry, but in disgust. Daniel, do you know how humiliating this is? I married you thinking you'd climb out of the mud. And here you are, sinking deeper. Daniel swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. It's just a setback, Clara. I'll find another position. I've been saving. We'll be fine. Her laugh cut sharper than broken glass. Fine. On what? Scraps. Do you think I married you to live like some airport janitor's wife? She leaned closer, her perfume sharp, her words sharper. You can't even hold on to the lowest job in the airline. What does that make you? A silence lingered. Daniel's jaw clenched, but he didn't answer. Because deep inside, behind the quiet eyes that Clara had long stopped noticing, he carried a truth. One that could silence her venom in an instant. A truth that could make the entire airport bend to him. But he wasn't ready, not yet. Through the glass window, Daniel caught sight of Captain Reynolds, a tall, silver-haired pilot stepping out of a luxury car. He moved with effortless confidence, his crisp uniform adorned with golden stripes. Passengers stopped to glance at him the way people glance at kings. Clara's gaze followed, her lips parting slightly. Now that, she whispered, almost to herself, is a real man. Daniel felt the sting but remained still. He watched Reynolds stroll through the terminal, unaware that fate had just placed the senior pilot in the crosshairs of his crumbling marriage. Clara turned back, her eyes glinting with contempt. You'd better figure out your life, Daniel. Because I didn't marry a man to watch him crawl. Her words hung in the air as Daniel lowered his badge on the desk. His hands shook, not with fear, but with a fire only he could feel. Clara thought she had just seen her husband lose everything. What she didn't know was that Daniel Whitmore had been playing a much bigger game all along. The drive home was quiet, except for the sound of Clara's acrylic nails tapping against her phone screen. Daniel kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles tight around the steering wheel. The Houston skyline shimmered in the distance, but all he saw were the cracks forming in his marriage. Clara broke the silence first. Do you remember our wedding day, Daniel? She asked, not with affection, but with accusation. I stood there in lace, believing you'd give me the life I deserve. A big house, expensive cars, a husband who commands respect. I didn't sign up to be a baggage handler's wife. Daniel exhaled slowly. He remembered the day well, the way Clara's veil floated in the summer breeze, the vows she whispered, the way she clutched his hand as if he was her future. Back then, her eyes had glowed with something he thought was love. But maybe it had only been hunger for the life she imagined he could give. You think money is everything, Clara? His voice was quiet but firm. Marriage is about building together, not climbing on someone else's back. She rolled her eyes. Spare me the poetry. Love doesn't pay for vacations in Paris or diamonds on my wrist. Do you know how embarrassing it is when my friends brag about their husbands, lawyers, doctors, men with power, and I smile politely, knowing mine spends his days hauling suitcases? Daniel's grip tightened. If only she knew. If only she had patience to see beyond the uniform. But he remembered why he had chosen this path. Years ago, when his father passed, Daniel inherited not only grief but also an empire, majority shares in Whitmore Airlines. But he had sworn to himself that before he revealed his inheritance, he would test the people around him. He didn't want a wife who loved a billionaire, he wanted one who loved a man. He glanced at Clara now and realized she was failing the test miserably. As they pulled into the driveway of their modest suburban home, Clara's phone buzzed. Her lips curved into a sly smile as she typed a reply. Daniel caught the reflection in the windshield, Captain Reynolds. His chest tightened, but he said nothing. Inside the house, Clara tossed her purse onto the couch and poured herself a glass of wine. I'm warning you, Daniel, she said, swirling the liquid lazily. I won't waste my youth on a man who's content to stay small. A man who can't even hold a uniform, let alone command respect. Daniel studied her for a long moment, then walked to the study where the mahogany desk still smelled faintly of his father's cigars. Hidden in the bottom drawer were sealed folders, ownership documents, boardroom minutes, shareholder agreements. Proof that the baggage handler she mocked was the very man who decided who flew and who didn't. He placed a hand on the drawer, feeling the weight of it, then let go. Not yet. From the living room, Clara's laughter rang out as she read another message. Daniel leaned back against the desk, his jaw firm. He had played the humble man long enough. But before the game ended, Clara would show her true face. And when the truth came out, it would be her turn to crawl. The next morning, Clara lingered outside the airport cafe, adjusting her hair in the glass door. Daniel had dropped her off, saying he was heading to a meeting. She didn't ask questions, she never did anymore. Her eyes were on something else entirely, Captain James Reynolds. He entered with the effortless stride of a man who knew the world bent for him. Silver hair neatly combed, his uniform tailored to perfection, golden stripes glinting on his shoulders. The cafe staff straightened instinctively, smiles widening as though royalty had arrived. Good morning, Captain, the barista gushed. Reynolds smiled warmly. The usual, thank you. Even his voice carried the smooth authority of command. Clara's breath caught. She had seen him before from a distance, but today was different. Today, she would make herself seen. She stepped forward, pretending to bump into him, spilling her purse across the floor. Lipstick, keys, and credit cards scattered like confetti. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry, she exclaimed, crouching quickly. Reynolds bent down, his large hand retrieving a compact mirror. Their eyes met for the first time, his, a piercing steel blue, hers, wide and shimmering with feigned embarrassment. No harm done, he said smoothly, handing her the mirror. Though I must say, not every day I get to rescue a lady before my morning coffee. Clara laughed softly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Well, consider me grateful. They gathered the rest of her things, and Reynolds held the door open for her. Clara hesitated, then tilted her head. Can I buy the hero his coffee? Least I can do. A faint grin touched his lips. Generous offer. But let me return the favor. After all, you've made my morning far more interesting. As they sat down together, Clara felt a rush she hadn't felt in years. Daniel's tired, weary face flashed in her mind, and she shoved it away. So, Reynolds began, stirring his coffee with lazy precision, what brings you around here? Traveling somewhere? Clara leaned forward, lowering her voice. My husband works here. Or, worked. He was let go yesterday. Ah. Reynolds nodded sympathetically, though his eyes didn't linger on pity. Tough business, airline cuts. But you strike me as someone who deserves more than life's scraps. Her pulse quickened. He sees it too. And what about you? She asked coyly. Flying the world, admired by everyone, must be nice. He chuckled. It has its perks. But it can be lonely at altitude. His gaze locked on hers, deliberate. Clara's lips parted slightly. She felt seen in a way Daniel hadn't made her feel in years. Not as a burden, not as someone complaining about bills, but as a woman desired. When their coffees were done, Reynolds rose, slipping her a crisp business card. Clara, wasn't it? Call me if you ever want to escape the ground for a while. She took it with trembling fingers, her heart racing. As Reynolds walked out, sunlight catching the gold on his uniform, Clara closed her hand around the card like it was a lifeline. At home, Daniel would be waiting, trying to piece their life back together. But Clara's eyes were already on the sky, and the man who ruled it. Dinner was quiet, the only sound the scrape of forks against porcelain. Daniel had cooked, as usual, roasted chicken with mashed potatoes, the kind of meal that once made Clara beam with gratitude. Now she picked at it like it was beneath her. You know, Clara began, her tone sharp enough to slice through the silence, I saw Captain Reynolds today. Daniel's fork froze mid-air. He looked up, his eyes calm, betraying nothing. Oh. And? Clara smirked. And he's everything you're not. The words landed heavier than any suitcase Daniel had ever lifted. She leaned back, twirling her wine glass. He commands respect. The way people light up when he walks into a room, it's magnetic. He doesn't haul bags around like some laborer. He flies planes. People look at him and see power, status, dignity. She let out a mocking laugh. When they look at you, they see a man who can't even keep that job. Daniel set his fork down carefully. He had endured many of her barbs, but this one cut to the bone. Still, his voice was steady. Clara, respect isn't about uniforms or gold stripes. It's about character. About loyalty. Clara's eyes narrowed. Character doesn't buy me diamonds. Loyalty doesn't book me seats in first class. He studied her, the lines of disappointment deepening on his face. So that's what matters most to you? The world seeing you on the arm of a man with wings. Her lips curved into a cruel smile. Exactly. And don't you dare tell me I'm wrong for wanting more. You think suffering makes you noble? It just makes you small. I married you to rise, Daniel, not to sink into mediocrity. A silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Daniel leaned back, folding his arms. And what happens when that shiny uniform loses its shine? What happens when the man behind the stripes is just another flawed soul like me? Clara scoffed. Reynolds will never fall. Men like him are untouchable. Men like you are replaceable. Her words struck like a whip, but Daniel only nodded slowly. Inside, a fire smoldered. He thought of the sealed documents in his study drawer, proof that Reynolds, for all his swagger, still answered to him. Proof that Clara's definition of a real man was about to collapse. But he held his tongue. Let her dig her own grave. Clara sipped her wine, her eyes distant, as though she were already in another world, a world of luxury jets and champagne, where her husband didn't exist. Daniel rose quietly, clearing his plate. "Enjoy your dinner," he said softly, though his gaze lingered on her longer than usual. As he walked away, Clara barely noticed. Her mind was still replaying Reynolds' smile, his voice, the weight of his business card in her purse. She didn't see Daniel pause at the doorway, his jaw set. She didn't hear the thought echoing in his mind, "Soon, Clara. Very soon, you'll know exactly who your husband is." Rain hammered against the windowpane that night, the storm outside echoing the tension inside. Daniel sat at the dining table, papers spread before him, job listings, budget sheets, and a notebook full of plans. He was already sketching ways to rebuild. Clara, however, paced the room in heels, her arms crossed tightly, her impatience spilling into every movement. "Daniel," she snapped, "do you realize how pathetic this looks? Sitting here, scribbling like some high school dropout. You lost your job, and instead of fighting, you're clinging to scraps." Daniel didn't look up. "I'm trying to figure out a way forward. That's what men do when life knocks them down, they get back up." Clara's laugh was cruel, hollow. "Back up? You're already on the floor. And I'm not going to kneel down there with you." Finally, Daniel raised his head. His eyes were tired, but steady. "Clara, I love you. We've built years together. Don't throw it away because of one setback. One setback." She hissed, slamming her hand against the table. "Do you think I married you to live like this? Watching my friends jet off to Europe while I clip coupons at Walmart? I want a man who can fly, Daniel. Not a man chained to the ground." Silence. The storm roared louder. Then Clara pulled something from her purse, a neatly folded envelope. She dropped it onto the table. "These are divorce papers. Sign them." Daniel froze. The paper stared back at him like a final verdict. He swallowed, searching her face for even a flicker of doubt, but her eyes were ice. "Clara," his voice cracked, not from weakness, but from disbelief. "After everything? You'd throw us away for what?" Her lips curled into a bitter smile. "For someone who knows what it means to be a man. Captain Reynolds makes me feel alive. He's respected, admired. Standing beside him, I'd be somebody. With you, I'm invisible." Daniel's hand trembled as he touched the envelope, but he didn't open it. Instead, he met her gaze with a calm she didn't expect. "If this is what you want, I won't stop you. But remember this moment, Clara. Remember the man you left in the storm." She snatched her coat, her perfume lingering in the air like betrayal itself. "I don't need your lectures. Reynolds is waiting for me." The front door slammed, leaving Daniel in the hollow silence of a house that no longer felt like home. Outside, Clara hurried through the rain, her heels clicking against the pavement until she spotted the sleek black car parked beneath a street lamp. The door opened, and Captain Reynolds stepped out, umbrella in hand, his smile warm, inviting. Clara slipped beneath it, her heart racing as he kissed her cheek. She didn't look back. But Daniel, standing silently at the upstairs window, did. His hand pressed against the glass, his face unreadable. And though Clara thought she had left a broken man behind, the truth was far more dangerous. She had just betrayed the one man who owned the very world she was running to. The next morning, Daniel rose before dawn. The storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean, but inside him a different storm gathered strength. He dressed not in the worn uniform Clara once mocked, but in a tailored charcoal suit that had been resting in the back of his closet for months, waiting for this day. He drove past the airport terminal, past the baggage claim where his co-workers had once clapped him on the back, and straight toward the executive building with mirrored walls that reflected the morning sun like polished silver. Few knew the man behind those glass doors. Fewer still knew that Daniel Whitmore, the baggage handler, carried keys to rooms where destinies were written. Inside the lobby, a receptionist straightened at once. Good morning, Mr. Whitmore. The board is waiting for you. Daniel offered a polite nod and strode toward the elevator. The ride to the 28th floor was silent except for the steady hum of cables. His reflection in the polished doors stared back, calm, firm, and ready. When the elevator opened, the hum of conversation spilled out from the boardroom. Men and women in sleek suits turned as he entered, voices dropping. The chairman of operations rose quickly. Mr. Whitmore, welcome. Daniel took his place at the head of the table. The same hands Clara once mocked for carrying luggage now rested on mahogany polished by generations of power. Let's begin, Daniel said simply. The room came alive with reports. Rising fuel costs, fleet expansion, negotiations with international airports. Daniel listened carefully, asking questions that revealed not only his intelligence but his experience, years of observing operations from the ground. While others only studied charts and graphs, Daniel had seen the sweat of baggage handlers, the exhaustion of flight attendants, the pride of pilots walking tall. He understood the business from every angle. Finally, the head of finance slid a thick file across the table. Sir, as majority shareholder, your approval is required for the new contracts. Shall we proceed? Daniel opened the folder, scanning the pages. His eyes caught on a familiar name, Captain James Reynolds. A ripple of irony surged through him. Clara's real man, the pilot she had thrown him away for, was nothing more than an employee, a name on a payroll, a man who ultimately answered to him. He signed the papers with a steady hand, closing the file with a soft thud. Approved. The executives exhaled, relief washing through the room. As the meeting concluded, Daniel remained seated, staring out the window at the runway below. Planes taxied slowly, passengers hurried through jet bridges, baggage handlers hoisted suitcases onto conveyor belts. His old life was there, just yards away, the sweat, the noise, the weight. But now he saw it differently. He hadn't lost everything, as Clara believed. He had only shed the disguise. Daniel rose, adjusting his cufflinks. Gentlemen, prepare for the shareholder gala. It's time this airline remembered who owns the sky. And as he left the room, a single thought lingered in his mind like a vow: when Clara sees the truth, it will be too late. The airport terminal buzzed with life that Saturday afternoon. Families dragged their luggage, children pointed at planes taking off, and businessmen barked into cell phones. Among the crowd, Clara strolled on the arm of Captain James Reynolds, her heels clicking proudly against the polished floor. Heads turned as they passed. People noticed the captain's crisp uniform, the confidence in his stride, and then her, a woman radiant in a designer dress, clinging to him like she already belonged to his world. Clara basked in the attention, her chin lifted high. For the first time in years, she felt like she was walking on a stage where everyone applauded. Then, as fate would have it, she saw him. Daniel stood by the coffee kiosk, a simple cup in hand, dressed in jeans and a button-down shirt. No uniform. No stripes. Just the man she had left behind. Her lips curved into a smirk. This was the moment she craved, proof that she had upgraded. Well, if it isn't Daniel, she purred, tugging Reynolds closer. What are you doing here? Looking for work carrying someone else's bags? Reynolds chuckled lightly, his arm tightening around her waist. I suppose life's been difficult since the cuts. Daniel met their eyes calmly, his face unreadable. Life has a way of revealing who people really are, he said softly, taking a sip of his coffee. Clara tilted her head, mocking. You should have seen the look on his face when I told him I was leaving, James. Absolutely crushed. Some men just aren't built for the heights we were meant to reach. Her laughter rang out, sharp and cruel, drawing curious glances from nearby passengers. A flush crept up Daniel's neck, but he didn't react. Instead, he set his coffee cup down, his lips curling into the faintest smile. That smile unsettled her for a heartbeat. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't defeat. It was something else. Something she couldn't name. "You look too calm for a man who lost everything," Reynolds said, narrowing his eyes slightly. Daniel held his gaze. "Maybe because I know the storm hasn't ended yet. Sometimes, the sky clears just before the thunder returns." Clara scoffed, tugging Reynolds toward the gate. "Poetic nonsense. Come on, James. We have a flight to catch. Some of us are moving forward." As they walked away, Reynolds cast one last glance over his shoulder at Daniel, a look caught between curiosity and unease. Daniel remained still, watching them disappear into the crowd. Passengers brushed past, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding in plain sight. He picked up his coffee again, savoring it slowly, as though time itself belonged to him. Clara believed she had humiliated him, paraded her victory before his very eyes. What she didn't know was that every plane Reynolds flew, every paycheck he cashed, every uniform he proudly wore, tied back to Daniel's signature. And very soon, the world would know too. The ballroom glittered beneath crystal chandeliers, the air thick with the scent of champagne and expensive cologne. It was the annual Whitmore Airlines shareholder gala, a night of silk gowns, tailored suits, and whispers of power deals inked over hors d'oeuvres. Clara walked in on Captain Reynolds' arm, her red dress hugging every curve. She felt radiant, untouchable, draped in the prestige of being the pilot's companion. Cameras flashed, executives greeted Reynolds with nods of respect, and Clara smiled proudly, certain she had finally secured the life she deserved. "Stick with me," Reynolds whispered as they crossed the marble floor. "Tonight, you'll see how far above your old life you've climbed." Clara's heart fluttered. Old life. She liked the sound of that. At the center of the room stood a podium draped in velvet. The company's top executives gathered nearby, murmuring about the arrival of their elusive majority shareholder. Clara leaned closer to Reynolds. "You've never met him, have you?" He shook his head. "Few have. They say he keeps to himself, but his signature controls everything." The crowd hushed as the chairman of operations stepped to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Tonight, we celebrate not just our growth, but the vision of the man who has guided this airline from the shadows. Please welcome, our majority shareholder and owner, Mr. Daniel Whitmore." Clara's laugh caught in her throat. Her wine glass slipped, shattering against the floor. From the edge of the ballroom, Daniel emerged. No uniform. No baggage handler's badge. Just a man in a perfectly cut suit, shoulders broad, chin high, eyes steady. The room erupted in applause as executives rushed forward to shake his hand. Clara's breath came in sharp, shallow gasps. "No," she whispered. "It can't be." Reynolds' face stiffened, confusion flickering in his eyes. You know him?" Clara could barely speak. That's my husband." On stage, Daniel adjusted the microphone, his voice calm but commanding. "For years, I've walked these halls unnoticed, watching, listening, learning. Some saw me as just another man in uniform, carrying bags. But the truth is, I carried this airline on my shoulders long before I ever wore that badge." His gaze swept the room, pausing for the briefest moment on Clara. "And tonight, I step forward not as a worker, but as the man entrusted with its future." Applause thundered. Investors nodded with admiration. Clara felt the room tilt beneath her, as though the chandelier lights were mocking her. Reynolds cleared his throat, trying to recover his composure. "He's your husband." Clara's lips trembled. I didn't know." Daniel smiled faintly from the stage, not bitter, not triumphant, just certain. And in that moment, Clara realized she hadn't left a broken man. She had abandoned an empire. The music swelled, champagne glasses clinked, and the applause rolled on. But for Clara, the sound was nothing but the deafening echo of her own ruin. The gala roared on, but for Clara, the glittering ballroom dissolved into a blur. She could hardly breathe. Her heart pounded as she watched Daniel shake hands with CEOs and senators, laughing softly as photographers scrambled for his attention. Captain Reynolds stiffened beside her, tugging at his collar. The confident air he always carried seemed to shrink. "Clara," he muttered, his voice low, "why didn't you tell me your husband was him?" She swallowed hard, her throat dry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Reynolds' jaw tightened. The whispers had already started. Guests glanced their way, eyes darting between the powerful owner on stage and the woman clinging to his pilot. The air buzzed with curiosity and judgment. Clara felt exposed, naked beneath the chandelier's light. Desperation surged through her. She moved quickly, weaving through the crowd until she stood at the edge of the stage, just as Daniel stepped down. "Daniel!" Her voice cracked. He stopped, glancing at her with calm, unreadable eyes. For a fleeting moment, she saw the man she once knew, the husband who used to bring her flowers after long shifts, the one who cooked her dinners when she was too tired. But that softness was gone, replaced with something harder, sharper. "Daniel, please," she whispered, her hands trembling as she reached for him. "I made a mistake. I didn't understand. If I had known." He cut her off with a quiet laugh, low and cold. "If you had known." His eyes bore into hers. "Then your love would have been real. Your loyalty genuine." Clara's lips trembled. Tears welled. I thought you'd failed. I wanted more. More." His voice rose slightly, drawing a hush over the crowd nearby. "I gave you my heart. My years. My loyalty. And when life tested us, you traded it all for a man in a uniform." His gaze flicked briefly toward Reynolds, who stood rigid, avoiding eye contact. "A man who answers to me." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Clara shook her head furiously, clutching his arm. "No, Daniel, please. I love you. I always have. I just lost my way." Daniel gently pried her fingers off, his touch firm but not cruel. "You love what I own, Clara. Not who I am. And that is the tragedy of us." Her knees buckled, and she sank slightly, her sobs muffled by the swell of music resuming in the background. Reynolds stepped forward, his face pale. "Mr. Whitmore. I meant no disrespect. I didn't know she was." Daniel's stare froze him mid-sentence. "You don't need to explain, Captain. I don't fire men for human weakness. But loyalty matters in my skies. Consider this your last warning." Reynolds swallowed, nodding stiffly. Clara clutched at the hem of Daniel's jacket, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Please, don't do this. Don't leave me." For the first time, Daniel smiled, not in warmth, but in finality. "You wanted a man with wings, Clara. So fly. But don't expect me to catch you when you fall." With that, he turned and walked away, the crowd parting in reverent silence. Clara collapsed onto a chair, her sobs drowned by the sound of champagne glasses clinking to toast the man she had lost forever. Weeks passed, and the world inside Whitmore Airlines shifted. Headlines praised Daniel Whitmore, the hidden billionaire, who had once walked among his workers and now revealed himself as the man behind the empire. Executives marveled at his humility, employees admired his quiet strength, and competitors suddenly saw him as untouchable. But Clara? Clara was nowhere. She wandered the city in silence, her once perfect hair now tangled, her designer clothes traded for whatever she could afford. Reynolds had dropped her swiftly, embarrassed by the whispers that followed him at work. Pilots lived on pride, and he couldn't bear being known as the man who stole the owner's wife. One evening, without explanation, he blocked her number and never looked back. Clara sat alone in their empty house, Daniel's house, realizing she no longer belonged there. The ring she once wore so proudly was gone. The invitations to parties had dried up. Her phone, once buzzing with friends eager to dine with the pilot's girl, now stayed dark. Meanwhile, Daniel's life blossomed. At the gala's after-party, he had crossed paths with Elena Ramirez, a quiet but brilliant operations manager who had always treated him with respect when he wore the baggage handler's badge. She had never mocked him, never looked down on him, even when she thought he was just another man hauling luggage. They began meeting over coffee, conversations flowing with ease. Elena listened without judgment, laughed without malice, and saw him not as a bank account or a uniform but as Daniel, the man, not the myth. One evening, as they walked along the riverfront, Elena glanced up at him. "You know," she said softly, "the world might see you as untouchable now. But I see the man who stood in the rain, carrying bags heavier than anyone else, and still smiled at the people around him. That's the man I admire." Daniel's chest tightened, warmth flooding him in a way Clara's praise never had. For once, he felt seen, truly seen. Back in her crumbling apartment, Clara stared at old photographs, her tears smudging the faces smiling back at her. She replayed Daniel's last words, "You wanted a man with wings, Clara. So fly." But there were no wings left for her. Only silence, regret, and the echo of a door she had slammed too quickly. One night, she stood outside the airline headquarters, hoping to catch a glimpse of Daniel. She saw him step out, Elena by his side, their laughter soft in the evening air. Clara's lips parted as if to call his name, but the sound caught in her throat. Daniel glanced her way briefly, and then turned back to Elena, walking into a future that no longer included her. Clara sank onto a bench, her body trembling with sobs. She had gambled everything for the illusion of status and lost the one thing that could never be bought, true love. Sometimes the richest man isn't the one in uniform or with the biggest title, it's the one who stays loyal, humble, and true. Don't trade real love for glittering lies. Because once it's gone, no amount of wealth, wings, or power can bring it back.